Bonsoir à tous et à toutes et bienvenue à notre conseil, à votre conseil virtuel extraordinaire pour adopter le budget de notre arrondissement. Je suis Sue Montgomery, je suis la mairesse de CDN-NDG et j'aimerais reconnaître que nous sommes en territoire autochtone, laquelle n'a jamais été cédée. Je reconnais la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous sommes aujourd'hui. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. I would like to express my condolences to the widow and the children of Joyce Echequan, who died in hospital while listening to racist insults from those who should have been showing her compassion and care. I took part in the demonstration on the weekend, and I was encouraged to see so many people, thousands of people turn out in support. But these marches have to translate into action to help our Indigenous brothers and sisters who experience racism every day in this country, which is unacceptable. Alors, j'aimerais présenter maintenant mes collègues, Monsieur Peter McQueen de NDG.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Merci d'être avec nous ce soir. Thank you for your questions and for listening in tonight.
Monsieur Christian Arsenault de Loyola.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us.
Madame Magda Popianou de Côte-Neige.
Bonsoir. Good evening, everybody.
Monsieur Lionel Perez de Lardington.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone.
Et Monsieur Marvin Rautran de Snowden.
Bonsoir collègues et bonsoir mesdames et messieurs pour être avec nous aujourd'hui pour débattre du budget de l'arrondissement.
Et j'aimerais également présenter notre directeur d'arrondissement, Monsieur Stéphane Plante, et je vous prie de présenter vos collègues.
Oui, alors bonsoir Madame la mairesse, Madame la conseillère, Messieurs les conseillers. Avec moi aujourd'hui, Madame Guylaine Gaudreau, directrice des services administratifs, Madame Hélène Brousseau, chef de division finance, Madame Geneviève Reeves, greffière, Madame Patricia Arcan, conseillère financière, et finalement Madame Julie Faraldo-Boulet, secrétaire recherchiste.
Merci beaucoup et merci d'être avec nous ce soir. Alors, on passe maintenant à 10.02, adoption d'ordre de jour. C'est proposé...
Oui.
OK.
Allez, je vous écoute.
C'est proposé par M. McQueen et adopté, appuyé par Mme Popianou.
Je propose, excuse-moi.
Oui, OK. Adopté. 10.03, période de commentaires de la mairesse et des conseillères. On a 15 minutes. Attendez, je vais commencer le timer. Alors, bonsoir à tous et à toutes et bienvenue encore et merci d'être avec nous ce soir. I'm proud to present the 2021 budget for Côte-Neige-NDG. Côte-Neige-NDG is choosing to continue moving forward with new amenities and the replacement or improvement of sports facilities and parks. Unfortunately, our borough suffers from chronic underfunding from the City of Montreal. This year, our transfers to our operating budget have only increased 1%. This will not even cover the raises in salaries. Encore une fois, cette année, Côte-Neige Notre-Dame-de-Grâce sera négligée par la Ville de Montréal avec des transferts financiers nettement insuffisants. Malgré le sous-financement chronique, nous sommes fiers d'investir dans nos installations communautaires et les services à la population. Projet Montréal will try to spin that they are increasing the budget 3.7%. These transfers are for very specific envelopes, such as libraries, parks, and snow removal. While I'm grateful for the transfers in these areas, it does not give the borough the flexibility to determine our own priorities. It does not cover rising costs of salaries, fuel, and maintaining our aging infrastructure. Mais parmi les projets priorisés en 2021, on retrouve la rénovation de chalets des parcs Summerled, Van Horn, Coffee et Mackenzie King. On ajoute un terrain de basketball au parc Coffee. L'ajout d'un demi-terrain de basketball au parc Gilbert Layton. Le remplacement d'équipements sportifs au parc Martin Luther King. L'aménagement du nouveau parc à chiens. La planification d'un tout nouveau parc lié au projet immobilier Westbury. L'amorce de réaménagement de parc Jean-Briand. And major renovations to the chalet of Park Loyola and to the Centre Sportif Trenholm are also centerpieces of this budget. After years of uncertainty and decentralized operations, I am proud to announce that the borough is approving funds to allow us to take the first step in creating a permanent home for the Loyola Centre. L'année dernière, l'arrondissement a planté 831 arbres sur son territoire et nous comptons en faire autant cette année. We'll also continue to invest in road safety and traffic calming measures. We have a modest increase in the local property tax rate, which I know is what interests all of you. The increase is only 1.9%, which is the equivalent to an extra $4.30 on a home valued at $500,000. So this is lower than the inflation rate. I invite all councillors to join me in voting for this budget. J'aimerais remercier Guylaine Gaudreau, Hélène Brousseau, Patricia Arcan et toute l'équipe des finances de l'arrondissement qui ont travaillé très fort sur ce budget. Bravo, merci beaucoup. Alors, on passe maintenant à Monsieur Arsenault.
Merci, Madame la mairesse. Bonsoir tout le monde. Merci d'être parmi nous ce soir. It's budget time, and it is the last budget that elected officials will be voting on this mandate. And like most budgets, there's some good and some bad. I cannot deny that this is a great budget for the Loyola district. It brings some much needed investments to our park chalets, most notably. We've got the Coffee Park Chalet. We're looking at combining that with a new basketball court that we'll be approving later today as well. We've got an expanded and renovated chalet for the Loyola Center, which is much needed to provide a permanent home for the Loyola Center itself. And we've got a repaired and fixed up chalet in Patricia Park as well. This comes on top of reparations and a project that's been submitted for provincial funding for the Trenholm Center. More repairs to the lights in Trenholm Park for the soccer fields, a dog run in Loyola Park, and a half court basketball for Gilbert Layton as well. So what I see in many of the specific projects for this budget is that they take into account needs that have been expressed in Loyola, that have been made known to us, over the last few years. I think that's a great thing. At the same time, I can't help but note that there is a lack of strategic planning and strategic orientation in the budget, which is something that I've noted for past budgets as well. Almost immediately after the elections in 2017, Councillor Popiano and myself made it clear to the mayor that we need a strategic plan for our borough. We need to have a framework in which we can operate, priorities that are clearly listed with clearly measurable goals, clear timelines, and, among other things, a clear way, a clear standard to which we can hold our employees. To this day, we do not have that. And so while the individual projects, many of the individual projects are in and of themselves good, I mean, who can be against repairing our park chalets? And that's a golden opportunity to make even better use of them for the next several years. Who can be against fixing the lights for soccer fields or installing more basketball courts in neighborhoods that have very few? But the lack of strategic vision is something that I think is going to create even more challenges down the road. I sent in my budget priorities in this summer. Some of them, a couple of them, are found in this capital budget, most notably. Many of them are not. I'll be asking questions to that regard, to that effect, come question period or come the actual points for the budget. And I will be keeping the rest of my comments for the actual budget items in the agenda. So it's a mixed bag. I think overall good for Loyola, but over the long run, I do have serious concerns about the lack of vision that our mayor is demonstrating for the borough of CDN-NDG. So that being said, I will save the rest of my comments for later. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Merci. Monsieur Gautran.
Thank you. I'm not going to say anything at this point. I have quite a bit to say on the budget when we get there. For the interest of citizens, I'm going to save it for the actual agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Popiano.
Merci, Madame la mairesse. Je veux emboîter le pas avec Monsieur Rotran et je préfère garder mes commentaires lors du dépôt de ce point à l'ordre du jour régulier du conseil d'arrondissement.
D'accord. Monsieur McQueen.
Yeah, ditto for me.
Monsieur
Même chose pour
Perez.
moi.
Monsieur Perez.
Oui, Madame la mairesse, merci. Je vais prendre peut-être 1 ou 2 minutes, mais j'aurai évidemment plus à dire lors du débat sur et le budget fonctionnement et sur le programme triennal de mobilisation. As was mentioned by Madame Mayor, by Mr. Arsenault, there's always challenges when it comes to bring forward a budget. There's always more that one would want to do, whether it be on services directly affected by the citizens, or whether it be in terms of capital investments. Ideas are not lacking, the will is not lacking, but obviously we have a limited amount of funds, of resources available to us, both at the borough level or what is transferred from a city center. But while doing this exercise, we have to take into account certain decisions that are made, decisions that sometimes will provide a short-term windfall, but will have a long-term consequences. I remember the last 2 years when the budgets were being debated and proposed, there was a tendency by the administration, by Madame Mayor and the time when she was with Projet Montréal, to essentially go into our surplus fund and start using those funds for our operating budget. And at the time, the first year that it was done, it was not a practice that was done in our borough. It was done on a very specific basis, but not for a specific type of additional expenses or employees that might well be deserved and necessary, but to start using our surplus, which are not a recurring source of revenue, to try and pay for the operating budget is simply a very dangerous way, and it's, in my view, it shows a certain fiscal mismanagement. So that tendency started a couple years ago, and it's been maintained. And what we're starting to see now is a withering away of our surplus to pay for the groceries, to pay for the basic services that we feel we need. There is absolutely no attempt by what's presented to try and find some cuts. Yes, there were savings that were found by the services, and kudos to them, and kudos to the citizens for having those. But when you start taking $1 million or $1.5 million year in, year out, after a number of years, you're not going to have any of those surpluses, and you're not going to have any kind of flexibility. That's unfortunately what's happened in other boroughs led by Projet Montréal administrations, where when they came into power, they had certain, reserves, and now they don't. So I think that's the most telling sign about the operating budget. We're essentially spending more money that we have, and we're using our savings to pay for it. And simply, that is just simply not a way to manage public funds and to manage a borough or a city. If it was 100 or 200,000 on a one-time shot, a one-time year on a specific expense, it's obviously could be justified. If it was simply related to the COVID-19 pandemic, again, we could understand it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about expenses that are now becoming recurring, and now we have problems paying for them. This is something I raised a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, when they started doing it. So it's nothing new, and I'm very concerned. And unfortunately, time has proven me to be right. Secondly, the capital works budget. There are some interesting investments, capital works in different boroughs, some necessary work, and sometimes not very glitzy in terms of repairing libraries, repairing basic other building infrastructure. But what is the most telling, and this is the second year where it's becoming now a trend, is the serious underfunding when it comes to maintaining our roads. Our borough will be spending $2 million to upkeep and to improve their road network. $2 million. That's peanuts. It's a drop in the bucket. Now, it used to be compensated by city center investing massive amounts, transferring 10 to 15, some years even $20 million for us to be able to compensate for a historically low capital works budget. But since last year, that's been cut down drastically to almost nil. There are investments, about $12 million, but again, these are all respect to programs that are unrelated to our road network. So all the incredible investments that we've been doing for the last couple of years to be able to maintain and to catch up our historical deficit, well, unfortunately, we're getting back into the situation where we're not investing enough, and those roads are going to become decrepit sooner than they should, and our road network will not improve. So I'll have more to say, but I think those are the two serious problems I see both in the operating budget and the capital works budget. Thank you, Madame Mayor.
Merci beaucoup. On passe maintenant à 10.04, période... non. 10.05, excusez-moi, période de questions et de demandes publiques. Madame Maître Reeves, pouvez-vous lire les règles?
Oui, tout à fait. C'est le 10.04. Donc, la période de questions pour cette séance extraordinaire sur le budget est de 30 minutes. Tel que précisé dans l'invitation à la séance du conseil, les citoyens ont eu l'opportunité de poser des questions ou de donner des commentaires par écrit en remplissant le formulaire en ligne qui était prévu à cette fin. Conformément à l'article 144.6 de la Charte, la période de questions lors de cette séance doit porter exclusivement sur le budget et sur le programme décennal d'immobilisation. Il y a 4 personnes qui nous ont soumis des questions et des commentaires. Une 5e question a plutôt été transférée à la séance ordinaire du conseil puisqu'elle ne portait pas sur le budget. Nous avons remis aux élus et aux directeurs la liste des questions suivant l'ordre qui a été déterminé par tirage au sort. en respectant l'alternance homme-femme. Je vous invite à expliquer le processus en anglais.
D'accord. Juste une question. On a combien de temps pour les questions? Pour 30 minutes? 30
oui.
minutes. Okay, d'accord. So we have 30 minutes for the question period. We received 5 questions, but only 4 of those are on the budget. So the questions for this council meeting, special council meeting, have to be on the budget. So the 5th one that doesn't have to do with the budget has been transferred to our regular council meeting, which will begin at 7 p.m. So the questions were chosen by a draw, and we alternate man-woman, but it just so happens that we have questions from all women tonight about the budget. So with that, I will start. We have 30 minutes, but I think we'll get to all the questions. So the first question is from Mary Ellen Kenny. The question is to all councillors. Do you think Côte-des-Neiges-NDG gets its fair share of the budget from city centre, yes or no? And I will start by saying no. That's Mr. McQueen.
Point of order, please. Question period is generally to one councillor. And a regular council meeting when we're face-to-face, it's one question and one supplementary question. In the virtual meetings, it's one question. It's not to everyone. It's not 6 questions. So technically, it's out of order to ask everyone to answer. I would suggest the citizen, if she is watching, wait for the debate on the budget when it will become abundantly clear whether the councillors think there is enough funding or not enough funding, and the vote of each individual councillor will be indicative.
Thank you for that point of order, Mr. Roton. Does anyone else want to answer yes or no? Okay, we will move on.
Madam Mayor,
oh, sorry. Did you put up your hand?
Yeah, I did. I do. Do you see it now, Madam Mayor?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Sorry.
I just want to address first Mr. Rotron's point of order. I do recognize that in past we do have, in fact, this rule. He's absolutely right. I think I leave it to you how you want to apply it. I think it may be a dangerous precedent if we allow everybody to answer the question. So I'll reiterate that point. In terms of specifically answering the question, I think there is serious underfunding, but I also think that it used to be compensated by City Centre. Unfortunately, in the last number of years under Projet Montréal City Centre administration, we're starting to see that there is not those kind of investments that have been followed suit as we've seen in previous administrations, regardless of what they were. So unfortunately, that's how I see it.
Merci. Alors, j'aimerais demander, Maître Reeves, est-ce que c'est correct qu'on ne peut pas poser la même question à tous les conseillers? Maître Reeves?
Oh, je ne sais pas,
Oui.
je sais pas quoi vous me posez. Vous voulez savoir
si par exemple, la première question, c'est adressé à tous les conseillers. Alors, est-ce que c'est permis de poser une question et demander tous les conseillers?
Il n'y a rien de prévu dans notre règlement de régie interne à ce sujet-là. C'est sûr que, étant donné que la période de questions est de 30 minutes, bien, le fait que chacun des élus réponde à la question, ça fait en sorte que peut-être on n'aura pas le temps de passer à travers toutes les questions. Mais comme tel, dans notre règlement de régie interne, il n'y a rien de prévu.
OK, merci beaucoup pour ça. So given that there's no specific reason and the only thing this person is asking for is a yes or no answer, I think that we have time for everyone to answer yes or no. Do you think it gets its fair share from City Centre? So Mr. Roton doesn't want to answer or has declined to answer.
Mayor Montgomery, I'm asked the exact same question in the regular council meeting, so I'll save my answer for then, so I do not have to repeat myself.
Okay, Mr. Arsenault? take that you're not answering the question. Madame Popiano?
Nous avons une question similaire qui s'en vient, Madame la mairesse, donc ça ne vaut pas la peine de répondre 50 fois sur la même question.
OK. Alors, question number 2. This is from Ashley Arbis. New residential constructions are recommended to follow the strategy d'inclusion and soon the règlement pour une métropole mixte. While this will certainly increase the number of social housing units and new developments, is there a budget that can be allocated to buy abandoned or underutilized buildings, commercial, residential, mixed, for the construction of social housing? This may allow for the possibility of having much needed social housing units in a much shorter time frame than buying new land and buying from scratch. Yes, as a matter of fact, we have what are called GRTs that are responsible for taking abandoned and underutilized buildings to turn them into social housing. And tonight we are adopting in our next council meeting a motion to do just that on Goyer Street. So, Madame Popiano, est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à ajouter?
Absolument. I want to make some points on, okay? Because it's like a mixed and a lot of people actually don't understand the way we finance social housing, okay? So first of all, the regulation for a mixed metropolis provide for contribution from real estate developers to build social and affordable housing. So these are the promoters who finance the housing. It's not the city and it's not the government. The social housing is funded only by the Quebec government, and the city only manages the program. The very important contribution of the city in the realization of the social housing is the purchase of land. And actually, it's what we did. We bought the 50-10 Pare was a very important, it's $6 million. And I heard Mr. I heard about a lot of words, okay, we don't invest, but this one is investment. It's in the PTI of the city buying lands to build houses, social houses. So it's important investment. So it's important also to know the city has already invested in projects to put in place, was put it in place by groups, social groups, which bought and present to the city projects to develop affordable housing in dilapidated buildings and not good buildings. So it's the way we will do it, the way we did it already, and the way we will do it. So. And it's a very important, it's a very, very important issue in our area. And I will be very happy to hear the mayor more often talking about this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make one point. It was $9 million that we bought Paris for, and it will be social housing in a school because in the Triangle, they've finished the development, and lo and behold, there's very little social housing and no school. So it was poorly planned. I will go to the next question. Darby McDonald from Projet Genesis. With the largest piece of undeveloped land in Montreal now finally seeing its day in the sun, Blue Bonnets is at the risk of mismanagement and underfunding from the city as they run a deficit, and the Public Consultation Office of Montreal demands no specific number of social housing units in their report. At a time when homelessness has doubled in Montreal and the needs of our borough for social and affordable housing could not be more urgent, I ask the council, what commitments will they make to ensure that Blue Bonnets receives appropriate funding and the community involvement, such as a shared offices program required to build the 2,500 social housing units it deserves? Thank you very much for your question. And I was very happy to see the report from the OCPM on Blue Bonnets, or the former Hippodrome, come out. I agreed with some of the recommendations. And here's an opportunity we have to create an integrated, complete community, hopefully carbon neutral, and not make the same mistakes that were made in the Triangle or in Griffintown, where you end up with all this housing, but no school, no daycare, no shopping, like no grocery stores, no market, and very little social housing. So what I plan to do is make sure that the planning office is in Côte-des-Neiges, and that the groups such as yourself, the Project Genesis and others who know the needs of residents in our borough are at the table, and to provide needed data that will help us design the best community that will meet the needs of our community. So thank you very much for that question.
I'd like to add a little bit. It's in my district. Thank you, Darby McDonald, for your question on behalf of Project Genesis. I read the OCPM report, which essentially cautiously said, well, if the city can somehow realize the project that it sent, the concept, not the project, because there is no project, the concept it sent to consultation, we won't stand in the way. But they did ask some embarrassing questions like, where's the money for the infrastructure, because it will take somewhere in the vicinity of 100 million. And the office is not necessarily opposed to going beyond the bylaw on inclusion in terms of social and affordable housing. But however, they sort of did wonder who's actually going to build the project, and that's a question I have as well. In essence, they also point out that there are certain legal requirements on the city in terms of road extensions, and that wasn't really mentioned during the consultation. They also indicate that probably if you're going to make this work, there will have to be additional large investments, including a possible intermodal train station along the CPR tracks, and as well the possibility of putting in a second exit to the Nemmer Metro to the west of the Décennal Expressway. So in essence, they asked a lot of questions, all of which had major infrastructure costs at a time when the city probably doesn't have the funding to do this in the short term. They also suggested looking at a couple of interesting measures, such as covering part of the roof of the expressway or having a pedestrian walkway over part of the expressway, all of which adds to costs, and none of the answers we've had from the city. So I think all it basically does is says, well, give us the facts. It's sort of a challenge to city administration. How are you going to realize this? Where's the money going to come from? Who's going to develop it? And I think we'll find out in a month's time from now whether the city is serious, whether there's any money in the capital budget is going to go to city council, because without major investments coming both from the city and from the government of Quebec, this project, this concept, as was announced a year ago, isn't going to go anywhere. Merci.
Madame Popiano, est-ce que votre main est levée ou est-ce que ça, c'est la dernière question?
Non, c'est la dernière.
OK. Alors. Bon. Bon, on va maintenant à la question 4, numéro 4. Madame Sarah Ortiz-Torres. With Côte-des-Neiges in a second confinement, tenants are more vulnerable than ever. Quarantining in apartments infested with vermin or mold, with water infiltrations, or where they are harassed or ignored by landlords is just unacceptable. The situation is deplorable and tenants need support. And their first line of defense is our borough city inspectors. Our inspectors need more staff and more coercive powers to protect tenants. Will the borough take steps to provide these necessary powers and funds to the city inspectors in their budget and plans? Thank you very much, Madame Ortiz-Torres, for that question. Absolutely. It's a very difficult time for everyone with COVID, but especially for people having to stay in small apartments. Luckily, we have a lot of park space this summer for people to get out and enjoy some fresh air. We're hoping the same will happen in the winter. However, unacceptable living conditions is an ongoing problem in our borough. So luckily, we did in past budgets, we did have money for more inspectors, but the problem wasn't necessarily more inspectors, but more follow-up. So we have put in place a system where we have stayed on top of landlords. We increased the fines, so that has had an impact. And we hired a liaison officer to work between tenants and inspectors. And we also hired someone to develop, to help work on developing social housing long-term. So all of these things we hope will help those tenants living in these difficult times and these difficult conditions. Okay. OK, je pense que c'est toutes les questions pour ce conseil. Alors, on passe maintenant à 10.05, période de questions des membres du conseil.
Oui, qui est de 15 minutes.
OK. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui a des questions?
Non, ça marche pour moi.
Non?
Non, merci
Bon.
pour moi.
OK, parfait. On passe maintenant à 30.01. Maître Reeves.
Adopter et soumettre au comité exécutif les prévisions budgétaires de l'arrondissement pour l'exercice financier 2021.
Je propose, et c'est appuyé par tous les conseillers, je pense, sauf Monsieur Rautran. Est-ce que j'ai bien compris que...
Non, je vais demander
Okay.
à ce que je ne sois pas appuyeur, Madame la mairesse. Merci.
OK. Mais
Donc,
Monsieur Arsenault, Monsieur McQueen et Madame Popiano, vous appuyez, vous êtes les appuyeurs?
Oui.
Oui.
OK. Bon. Vous comprenez, vous avez ça, Maître Reeves, ça va?
Okay.
oui, je comprends que M. Rotran et M. Pérez n'appuient pas.
Exact.
OK.
OK.
Est-ce que je peux parler en premier ou Madame la mairesse? Ou...
Oui, allez-y. Mais est-ce que les gens qui veulent parler, est-ce que vous pouvez lever les mains?
Je pense que j'ai le fait.
Oui, je ne l'ai pas. OK, excusez-moi, Monsieur McQueen, c'est Monsieur Rautran, puis Monsieur Arsenault, et après Monsieur Arsenault, c'est vous. OK?
Merci.
Monsieur McQueen?
Est-ce qu'il y a objection si je fais seulement une intervention sur les deux budgets? Je veux parler diviser programme décennial d'immobilisation et budget d'opération. Est-ce que je peux faire mon intervention sur les deux au même temps? Est-ce que ça marche, Madame?
Oui, j'ai aucun problème avec ça.
Good, merci. Premièrement, je dois dire que les dernières quelques années, il y a quelques investissements à Snowden qui a un bénéfice pour la population. Il y a un cours basketball qui est livré 7 septembre à Park Mackenzie King. C'était quelques mois en retard à cause de délais en construction à cause de COVID, mais c'était vraiment accueilli avec plaisir par la population. Le basketball, c'est énorme dans notre arrondissement, surtout à Côte-des-Neiges, et il y a plusieurs clubs de basketball à Snowden. Et nous avons investi l'année dernière, et c'est remarqué comme réalisation majeure pour nous autres, 67 $1,000 pour un nouveau pitch de cricket qui est au parc Van Horn. Les clubs de cricket ont vraiment aimé ça. Malheureusement, cette année, ils n'étaient pas capables de jouer à cause de COVID. Il y a très, très petit fenêtre pour jouer cet été. Et avec l'appui de la Ville-Centre, nous avons réussi le parc Sadie-Bronfman dans le Triangle, un beau parc de 15 millions de dollars, la majorité payée par la Ville-Centre, et qui va livrer un nouveau chalet pour la population. Une partie de la bonne planification dans le Triangle qui est bien accueillie par les résidents. Le PTE qui viennent pour les prochaines quelques années à quelques investissements à Snowden. Il y a $400 000 l'année prochaine pour le chalet Park Van Horn. Et mieux que ça, il y a 1,5 million qui va être payé par le central pour la réfection de chalet au parc Mackenzie King. C'est un projet un peu plus long terme, mais c'est payé à 100% par le central. Avoir dit ça, malheureusement, c'est les seules bonnes nouvelles. Par contre, à vous, Madame Montgomery, quand il y a quelque chose qui ne marche pas, je ne vote pas en faveur. Je vous invite à changer votre vote ce soir. Vous ne pouvez pas dire aux gens de notre arrondissement que ça ne marche pas, on n'a pas l'argent, on ne peut pas livrer les services, on ne peut pas faire ce qu'on veut. Nous avons une richesse foncière qui est, je pense, deuxième dans la ville de Montréal après Ville-Marie. Mais on est parmi les programme triannuel de mobilisation, maintenant rebaptisé programme décennal de mobilisation, qui est parmi les plus petits. Cette année et pour les prochaines années, ça va être 6 830 000 $. Pas grand-chose. Et c'est effectivement presque pareil comme les années antérieures. Avec l'inflation, on perd une certaine valeur chaque année. Notre budget, c'est-à-dire, est plus petit en dollars réels, valeur des dollars courants que c'était il y a quelques années. C'est dommage. Comme M. Perez, j'appuie seulement un programme décennal de mobilisation qui a l'appui additionnel de la Ville-Centre. Oui, c'est vrai, ils vont nous donner un chèque de 12 millions de dollars cette année, in addition to our $6.8 million in our BDI. Mais comme vous avez remarqué, beaucoup de cet argent est pour des projets spécifiques qu'on ne peut pas transférer. Ce n'est pas un chèque en blanc, c'est pour quelques projets où ils nous donnent leur portion des programmes provinciaux ou des programmes déjà acceptés par l'arrondissement. La différence est quand Denis Coderre est maire et avant lui, Gérald Tremblay, on avait beaucoup de l'argent dans cet arrondissement. Il y a beaucoup des investissements qui sont venus par ces deux maires qui a dit que, bon, même à 6,8 millions de dollars dans notre PT, on est capable de livrer des biens. Comme à Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, nouveau centre culturel, nouveau centre sportif, les deux ensemble, c'est 30 millions de dollars. C'est largement payé par la Ville-Centre, les gouvernements du Québec, par les programmes provinciaux, mais avec l'appui des maires Tremblay et Coderre. Dans mon district, dans le dernier mandat, j'ai été capable, avec l'appui de la Ville, de refaire Van Horn de Carey à Victoria, 12 millions de dollars. C'est Denis Coderre qui, effectivement, a appuyé ce projet. Oui, c'est vrai, une moitié est remplacement des conduits d'eau, mais le reste est nouveau trottoir, nouveau lumière, rechaussée de la rue. La rue de la Savane était faite. CAA a dit que c'était la 11e pire rue au Québec. Et avec l'appui de Denis Coderre, j'avais 13 millions de dollars pour un redesign total et réfection de ces rues, nouveau trottoir, nouveau chaussée. Et l'idée qu'un élu n'est pas avec l'administration a compté pour absolument rien. La Ville-Centre a injecté largement des fonds. À Côte-Neige, Mme Popiano, quand elle était en opposition, était capable de bénéficier d'un investissement majeur pour refaire Côte-Neige dans son district. Et l'administration de M. Coderre, et avant ça, Gérald Tremblay, a ajouté beaucoup de l'argent chaque année à notre budget de rechausser les rues pour nous donner l'argent pour les rues locales et pour aussi refaire les artérielles. So let's look at our budget for this year. We don't have a lot for our roadways. We've got some of the worst roads in the city of Montreal, and we got $2 million for our local roads. I've nebbished Public Works to redo roads like Coolbrook from Côte Saint-Luc to Snowden, Ponsard, and others, and they tell me we just don't have enough money. We'll put it on a list, maybe we'll get to it 5 years from now. Some of these roads are really in terrible, terrible condition. As Mr. Perez pointed out in his earlier intervention, we don't have the funding without the support of Center City, and we don't have the support of Center City. So as far as I'm concerned, the PTE does not meet our needs as a borough, cannot guarantee the citizens that we will be able to deliver the basic services that we have. For the operational budget, you said incorrectly that the budget is going up 3.7%. It's not going up 3.7. It's going up 3.2%. And you should note, in case you haven't, that most of that is actually our own money. It's coming from our surplus. We're adding $1.5 million from our surplus to pay for services that before were paid out of our operational budget. So you look at our budget and our ability to provide services to the citizens. What are we getting from Center City? We're getting a 1% increase, as you've rightly pointed out. There's inflation, so we're half of inflation. So in fact, our budget is worth less than it did beforehand. Moreover, we're going to, in a year where Center City has at least pledged to freeze taxes, we're going to ask citizens to pay 2.2% more in local taxes, and we're increasing the tariffs by 1.9%. I would have preferred that at least we give people a break. Now, at Center City, I've not voted for the plant budgets. I'm not sure you have. I think you did, and I'm hoping that this year coming up, you may change your mind. The plant administration of Projet Montréal has increased spending by 18% in 3 years. Do you know what inflation's been the last 3 years? It's been 6%. Our spending has gone up triple inflation. And this year, they announced a tax freeze with our money, which we've already given them in advance. The city of Montreal is doing us no favors with this tax freeze, and they're doing us no favors by giving us a 1% increase in our transfers from Center City. If you look at the operational budget closely, we've had to cut in a number of places to make up $853,000 to keep certain essential services and certain jobs going. In fact, my reading of the budget is we're $1.1 million short this year of where we should be. Had we had more money, we could be doing more. It's true with prudent management, and Mr. Plante and his team and finance have done an excellent job in keeping control of our budget. This year, we had to give back $2.1 million. I understand that. There was COVID. The city center had far less revenue. It was a difficult time. They gave back $2.1 million, yet there was still good fiscal management by our team. And I want to recognize that. And I thank Mr. Plante, and I thank Madame Goudreau, Madame Brosseau, and the whole team for the work they've done. But had we had more money, we'd be able to do more animation in parks, more cultural activity, and where I think we're really weak is more support of cultural communities who make up such a large part of our population and get so little of our direct funding. I want to say that there's a local borough party that's not represented on our borough council, but does exist in our borough, and I don't agree with their line that, oh, we should be paid on a per capita basis. I've said before, and I'll say again, that certain services are not on per capita basis. It costs the same to do 1 kilometer of roadway for snow removal in our borough as in a borough with less density and fewer people. It seems more expensive per capita in their borough, but it's exactly the same number of dollars. And we can play with numbers and statistics. What we really need to ask is, are we giving the services that we want and the services that we could give with this budget? My contention is we're not. In terms of PT, I want to repeat, it's really weak where I think citizens are really griping, and that is the roads are poor. There are so many that need to be repaved, and we don't have the capacity. It's not only the local roads. I look at Queen Mary Road between Décarie and Lemieux. and the road is like not quite a country lane, but it's getting there in a hurry. And that's the main commercial street in Snowdon. And we aren't seeing any support from Center City there. And it's not only in Snowdon, it's right across the borough. And in terms of this operational budget, we are using our own money to maintain services. And I fear, as Mr. Prez indicated in his original speech at the beginning of this meeting, that we will deplete our surplus and that one day we will find ourselves unable to provide the same level of services. We cannot keep on taxing our residents. Our residents are paying a higher share of municipal taxes than in the past. When the evaluation roll for the current 3 years went into effect, we had a larger increase in values here than certain other boroughs. You can say our residents are richer compared to certain other residents, but it's a hypothetical wealth because unless you're willing to sell your home, you can continue to work in it, you're paying on hypothetical riches that you're not intending to realize. And your borough council is adding a slight local tax and a slight increase in tariffs. And I suspect that the city of Montreal will do the same in terms of tariffs, ticket fees, and everything else. All this we will find out in November. So Madame Montgomery, I would invite you to consider my arguments. I would invite you to join me in voting against these budgets. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Autran. Alors, Monsieur Arsenault, je ne vois pas votre main. Est-ce
We agreed I would go next, Mayor Montgomery.
OK, d'accord. OK. Allez-y.
So first, I want to start with just taking offense or contradicting two of the things Mr. Rotron said. Only Marvin Rotron could be against the fact that the city center is freezing taxes next year. Nous gelons les taxes résidentielles et commerciales dans la ville de Montréal l'année prochaine. C'est une bonne nouvelle pour tous les Montréalaises, tous les Montréalais. Et c'est seulement Marvin Rotran qui pourrait être contre ça. On ne comprend pas. C'est une bonne nouvelle dans le budget de la ville de Montréal. The second thing Marvin said is a more Côte-Neige-NDG thing about basketball being more popular or better at Côte-Neige. I invite Marvin to come down here to Georges St-Pierre, Oxford Park, see the folks playing top quality basketball down here, and soon at West Haven. As Councillor Arsenault said, they're going to put in a nice half court at the Coffee Park, and we're ready to challenge Côte-Neige for a Côte-Neige-NDG basketball game.
Careful what you wish for, Peter.
Du point de vue de ma présentation ce soir, je vais suivre le même que M. Rotran. Je demande à la mairesse si je peux parler du budget d'investissement en premier et de fonctionnement tout en dans mon allocution présente. Alors, la première chose, dans mon district, il y a des bonnes nouvelles. Alors, écoutez, les résidents-résidentes de l'Est de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce ont poussé pour beaucoup d'années pour les investissements dans les centres sportifs et communautaires de l'Est NDG. Et lentement mais sûrement, nous avons réparé plusieurs bâtiments et c'est le manoir. On a beaucoup d'investissements dans la prochaine année dans le manoir pour le judo, pour le flex gymnastique, pour d'autres groupes communautaires dans ces bâtiments historiques de l'Est de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce. Il y a eu beaucoup d'investissements dans la bibliothèque Botrel et le centre culturel là, et bien sûr dans le centre communautaire et la piscine des Carrés et Côte-Saint-Antoine. We're also investing in this in the next year in the chalet of Summerled Park, as Mayor Montgomery mentioned. So that's the tennis park. So I consider that kind of an investment for all the folks of NDG. It's near the border of NDG and Loyola, but it is a needed investment for folks who use the children's park there or the tennis. Now into the nitty-gritty. Again, we've got people, especially Marvin Rotron, complaining that there's no investment in the road budget. Well, I disagree. What was recently repaved in Côte-Neige-NDG was Saint-Jacques. I mean, he says Van Horn was the 11th worst road in Quebec. Saint-Jacques was the worst road in Côte-Neige-NDG, and we got it fully repaved. It's not bumpity bump. It's now smooth, and that was major investment. And in fact, almost all the east-west arteries in NDG, and those are the important ones where more traffic is going, have been repaved. Côte-des-Neiges, Côte-Saint-Antoine, Saint-Jacques, as I mentioned, it is much better than a few years ago. And what Projet Montréal did was shift the investments onto the lead pipe problem. I mean, do you know that NDG, and Côte-des-Neiges NDG as a whole, is running ahead of the rest of the city and the number of lead pipes changed on our streets? And this is important. Somebody recently brought to my attention what exactly that low-level lead poisoning does to people, especially children, is it leads towards a lack of control of impulses. This is a serious situation that the sooner we get on this, the better. And Côte-des-Neiges NDG and the whole administration of Projet Montréal citywide has made it a top priority to get lead out of our drinking water. They've continued work on sidewalks and roads. Finally, the last thing I want to mention, dog parks. There's money in the budget for more dog parks in NDG. And it's very important to us that the folks in NDG who do have dogs, who value their dogs, are looking for a place for their dog to be able to go out, run off the leash in a safe spot, can be accommodated in as many spots as possible. So that is coming. Now for the budget. Écoutez, je sais pas, même la mairesse, même M. Rotran admettent, et c'est écrit noir sur blanc à la page 17 du document, que le transfert central a monté de 3,7 %. Je ne comprends pas, la mairesse se plaint que c'est attribué pour les bibliothèques, les parcs et l'enlèvement de la neige. Ben pourquoi pas? C'est des priorités que les gens de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce nous demandent. Écoute, plus d'heures pour les bibliothèques, et spécialement durant les fêtes à Noël. Plus d'activités, plus de propriétés dans nos parcs, plus les toilettes ouvertes plus souvent. C'est toutes des priorités que les gens de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce veulent. And of course, snow removal, you know, we all know when the snow comes this winter, of course, it's good that there's going to be more money for snow removal in Côte-des-Neiges NDG. So I don't understand what the complaints are. 3.7% increase is the same kind of slow, steady increase year after year. And this process started before Projet Montréal was elected with the plan. It was called the plan of equal. They reviewed all the kind of criteria for financing boroughs, and they did determine that Côte-des-Neiges NDG was somewhat underfunded, and they increased the spend. They've transferred to Côte-des-Neiges NDG on these specific things. So I don't understand this complaining that the money was transferred for libraries, snow removal, and parks, because that's three of the places we certainly do need the money. Finally, for what Mr. Perez said about spending money from the surplus in this year of COVID. Well, that's just it. It is a year of COVID. So this is a year where we need to step up. I mean, merchants are hurting. A lot of services, we need extra input, and we have to spend more money because of COVID, and that's what we're doing in this budget. So to me, it's a good budget, un bon budget de fonctionnement pour l'année. We're still, nevertheless, being careful with our money. I do think the services have done a good job. They've tried to identify a few spots where some money can be saved. If you look at page 25, for instance, you'll notice that we're saving some money on street lighting, on overtime pay for all the workers, on office supplies. Of course, people are working at home, so less need for office supplies, and on legal fees, funny enough. So I hope everybody will take that as let's save some money on legal fees. I hope the mayoress will take that lesson, and let's start doing something productive for the people of Côte-des-Neiges NDG. Merci.
Je crois que c'est mon tour, Madame la mairesse.
OK, allez-y. Merci.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame la mairesse. Donc, moi aussi, j'ai des bonnes nouvelles pour les résidents de Côte-des-Neiges. Donc, je veux parler du PDI, donc la Maison de la Culture et la Bibliothèque, un investissement de 1,9 million de dollars. Donc, il y a une mise aux normes de la ventilation. Il y a d'ailleurs plusieurs mises aux normes. Aussi, au centre communautaire, on va changer l'entrée. On va mettre à jour l'entrée. C'est un investissement de 100 000 dollars. Le fameux parc Jean-Briand, écoutez, c'est C'est un peu triste, c'est un parc dans lequel on a fait des investissements au fil des années, mais il faut refaire le chalet de parc. C'est toute une histoire parce que le parc est dans le territoire de l'arrondissement historique de Mont-Royal. Donc, il y en a différents. Mais écoutez, on est très content au moins qu'on l'a prévu au budget, qu'il y a 2 millions de dollars qui sont sur les investissements corporatifs. Et puis, l'arrondissement aussi va mettre de l'argent, mais on espère voir le chalet et le parc mis à jour. Donc, c'est un investissement de 3,2 millions de dollars. Bien sûr, du libre-service dans la bibliothèque, le fameux projet FRD. Donc, c'est plein de bonnes nouvelles. Il faut que les citoyennes comprennent qu'il y a de l'investissement corporatif qui se fait dans notre arrondissement. Il ne faut pas regarder seulement le PDI. Donc, c'est ce qu'on appelle les transferts, mais pas sur le budget de fonctionnement, sur les programmes d'investissement de la ville. Il faut aussi penser que la ville va investir. On a plein de projets structurants. Tout le monde parle de logement social. Pour pouvoir le construire, il faut investir. C'est sûr que ce n'est pas l'arrondissement qui a la capacité d'acheter des terrains ou même d'investir dans le théâtre Impress. C'est sûr qu'il va y avoir des investissements, comme mon collègue le disait, là, dans le parc. J'entendais M. Rotran qui nous parlait, oui, mais il faut planifier le développement de l'hippodrome. C'est beaucoup d'argent. Il faut le prévoir. Il faut, et bien sûr, il faut le prévoir. J'entendais aussi M. Pérez qui disait, la ville s'endette, elle n'arrête pas. Oui, mais pour construire et pour aller de l'avant, il faut emprunter de l'argent. D'ailleurs, vous savez, on n'a pas du tout été décoté en dépit du déficit, en dépit de tous nos investissements qu'on a faits. On est une administration responsable. J'entendais aussi M. Rotran qui disait oui, mais pendant telle administration et telle administration, qu'on ne les nomme pas, on construisait beaucoup de choses. Oui, mais on a changé de priorité. On vous a dit, les priorités sont le logement social, la mobilité, la transition écologique et le développement social. Et voilà dans quoi on va investir. Vous m'avez dit, M. Rotran, que j'aurais dû être très, très contente de la réparation de la rue Côte-des-Neiges. Non, je ne suis pas contente. On l'a refait à l'identique. On a investi des dizaines, des centaines de millions de dollars. Dans le temps de M. Tremblay, je ne veux même pas me rappeler, on a ouvert et couvert pendant 5 fois la rue. Donc non, on a construit à l'identique. Nous, tout ce qu'on fait, on fait durable, on ne fait pas l'identique, on fait au service de la population. Et en ce qui concerne le budget d'opération, effectivement, je ne comprends pas mes collègues ni la mairesse. Les transferts centraux sont de 3,7%. C'est ce chiffre qui est vrai. Bien sûr, quand tu fais le total et la moyenne, le champ fiscal, les revenus locaux, il y a le 3,2 et c'est vrai que l'arrondissement prend de l'argent de l'affectation des surplus, donc en affectation des surplus. Mais c'est sûr, mais on l'a toujours fait. Je me rappelle, Madame la mairesse, les premières années, c'est avec l'affectation de surplus qu'on a payé 3 inspecteurs en salubrité de logement. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est une priorité. On voulait que nos citoyennes aient des conditions décentes de vie. Donc, je suis très contente. Ce n'est pas le budget idéal, c'est après une situation très difficile, mais je suis très contente de faire des petits pas.
J'ai déjà dit la plupart de mes opinions sur le budget en général. There are a lot of numbers that have just been thrown around for any of the 20 or 25 people who are watching. I'm sure it's going to take a little, a bit of piecing together. So I'd rather ask a few questions, and I'll preface those questions with a little bit of context and information. Lately, we've seen a couple of fairly mediatized and high-profile budget asks on the part of the mayor. These requests, typically in the form of media interviews, speeches in council, or the occasional letter to downtown, have come after negative news, we'll say. Obviously, there was the tragic death of an elderly pedestrian at the corner of de Maisonneuve and de Carry. There are difficulties for many community organizations around the city, not just as a result of COVID, but as a result of long-term financial challenges, including the YMCA. So over the last month or so, Mayor Montgomery has made a couple of clear asks to downtown. However, for several months now, the mayor has deplored the financial situation at the city and what she is only since her departure from the Projet Montréal caucus termed some kind of fiscal inequity. And so I asked last week what the mayor had done specifically, concretely, over the past year since her departure from the majority party. As our first magistrate here in the borough and who carries much more weight with downtown than any individual councillor, to get more financial support from downtown. I did not receive a substantive answer. So I'm asking again this time, and she's known that it's been coming for days, so I expect a substantive answer. What actual meetings have you had with the mayor, with the president of the executive committee as the two most involved people on the budget, or other executive committee members? What real representations have you done downtown? What documentation have you provided to support and bolster your case that the borough is underfinanced? What have you done outside of council and the media? Honest question, and I'd like to hear your answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arsenault. And you're correct, I'm no longer in Projet Montréal. I was expelled by Mayor Plante last January, so it's coming up almost to a year. But you're still in Projet Montréal, which is the administration. And if I'm not mistaken, you have a meeting, a caucus every 2 weeks with the mayor, with Benoit Doré, with all the people of the administration. So you have access to these people. What have you done? What have you done? Because what the underfunding of our budget is from Projet Montréal. And when I was in the party, yes, I met with Doré. But you know what? Projet Montréal does not care about CDN-NDG. They don't care. So what have you done? What have you done? What has Madame Popiano done? What has Mr. McQueen done? You are the three that are still in Projet Montréal, which is the administration of the city.
Ms. Mayor, may I?
Sure.
You remember very well, okay, what I did, okay? We bought the land, 5010 Paris, okay? You remember very well, okay? Was me fixing the meeting, the first meeting concerning the impressor. Why you don't recognize Ms. Mayor? So don't ask me. You can ask somebody else, but not me, okay?
Mr. Arsenault, I'm asking you too.
Madam Mayor, I would just like to note that you didn't answer my question. And so I'm asking again.
No, I did answer your question.
And I asked, no, I'm saying, what have you done since you left Projet Montréal? Anything of substance, because I will note, before you answer, I will note that there are other borough mayors that are not with Projet Montréal that seem to have a very good working relationship with the city and with the president of the executive committee in a nonpartisan way to get their needs addressed. I know that off the top of my head, Alan D'Souza in Saint Laurent and Jim Bass from Pierrefonds-Roxborough are frequently going down to City Hall and making representations for their boroughs, and doing so in a nonpartisan way by demonstrating with documents à l'appui that they have these needs. So all I'm asking, seeing as this is your administration's budget that you are proposing, and that you have come out in the media repeatedly and in council repeatedly to say that we're underfinanced, I'm asking you, I think it's a very simple question. Can you provide us an account of the meetings you have had over the past year and the documentation you have provided to bolster your case with downtown that we are underfunded? It's a yes or no question. Can you provide that information?
We are underfunded. You are part of Projet Montréal. What have you done, Mr. Arsenault? What have you done? You meet with the mayor and the executive. You see them all in caucus every 2 weeks. Yes, he is not the mayor, but you know as well as I do that Projet Montréal does not care about Côte-des-Neiges-NDG. You said that to me when I was in your party. You won't say it now, but when I was in Projet Montréal, you said it. And furthermore, I send messages to the mayor's office. I write to the mayor's office. There is nothing. They don't even acknowledge my emails. Guess what? Because they don't care about Côte-des-Neiges-NDG.
Would you table those emails?
No, I won't. They're private.
Okay. So I'm going to note that I have not received an answer to a very reasonable question that I asked.
Mr. Arsenault, I don't work for you. I don't work for you. I work for the citizens. And I'm here trying to get money for the citizens. And I'm doing the best I can with the peanuts that Projet Montréal throws our way. If you worked for the citizens, you would be sitting in caucus talking to the president of the executive committee.
It's okay, Madam Mayor. I've heard all that I need to hear for that first question. The second one is regarding the email that I sent to you on August 18th, or to your chief of staff rather, with my budgetary priorities. There were not many that were listed. And I'll just quickly say to my colleagues, Perez and Rochon, gentlemen, I only have 2 more questions. And I promise that if the mayor is brief, I will be too. So I sent an email on August 18th listing budget priorities. Among them was a permanent home for the Loyola Center, and I can see that we're making a good start in this budget towards that. Even though, if I understand correctly, there is much more funding that needs to be worked out. That being said, there were also asks and requests in the budget that were far less substantial, far less costly, but that would really be helpful for the community. And the one that I wish to highlight tonight is funding for a citizen consultation process and tactical urbanism experiments on Summerlet. And I'm using this as an example because you and I both appeared in that video that we did in the campaign in 2017, saying that we wanted to revitalize Summerlet. Now, since then, I've been in touch with residents who have proposed ideas. We've got a group of people that are interested in getting involved. And here I am making the request to have a token amount, not even $100,000 included in the borough for this exercise. And I received no response, and I don't see it in the budget. At the beginning of the mandate, we actually had a line item in the budget for consultations, which was great. We made it, we put it to good use, but now we don't, and there's no response. So can you please speak to that issue?
Gladly. And I just want to be sure. So this is the video that you and I made in the campaign in the election in which you didn't vote for me, right? That one? Yeah. Okay. Even though you told other people to vote for me, you didn't vote for me. So first of all, Summerlet is a city center responsibility. Second of all, we have to balance the needs of all 5 districts in our borough with the pittance that Projet Montréal throws our way. So you can't get everything that you ask for. I know you sent me a list. Loyola Center, because it is going to serve the large number of underprivileged kids in your district, and they have been homeless, this center, for many, many months, if not years. This is a priority. And as you said, there's more funding necessary there. So we have to choose our priorities, and Loyola Center is one of them. Now, if you want to talk to your friends downtown and get funding for Summerlet, I would happily support that project.
Thank you for the response. Last question. Now, in the operating budget, we have a little bit more money for park maintenance. That's something that was included specifically in the increased transfers from downtown, which is definitely a step in the right direction. But as you all know, and specifically following the citizen park consultations that we held in the Loyola district last year, there were a number of issues that were raised. In fact, if I've said this once, I've probably said it a dozen times. what many people responded during those consultations, when we asked them, what do you like about your parks? What do you dislike? What would encourage you to spend more time here? Many people said, you know what? We're pretty happy with our parks just the way they are. We really just like the borough to do a better job of maintaining them and doing the small fixes, the small replacements. Now, to this day, now I understand the budget last year came just after we finished the consultation process. It's not enough time to integrate things into the budget. But what I'd like to know is, why has there been no formal response of the administration to this report that was the result of over 450 residents in the Loyola district getting involved in their local community and highlighting issues that certainly affect other parts outside of Loyola? I'm not just talking about Loyola here. And so, yeah, why are we somehow unable to propose as part of this budget the small fixes that add up to a big difference and changes to the way that we manage our parks?
I absolutely agree with you that we need more park maintenance. The parks are the jewel, I would say, the jewels of our borough. And I've gone on many tours of many of the parks this year. But, you know, there's only so much with the peanuts that Projet Montréal throws our way. There's only so much we could do. So maybe you should take it up with Mayor Plante and Mr. Benoit Doré and tell them we need more money for our parks.
So I suppose I can give you one last chance to actually give examples of how you did that concretely over the past year.
Yeah, you know what? On second thought, I will share those emails with you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And I'd like to know what you've done in return.
Madame la mairesse, est-ce que c'est mon tour de prise de parole?
Yes, last but not least, we saved the best for last.
Sorry, I have second term as well. I got a short intervention.
Oh, sure. Of course. Okay.
Merci, Madame la mairesse. Okay, vous savez, à entendre ce débat, si j'étais un citoyen, je serais extrêmement déçu, pour ne pas dire en colère. On lance des pierres l'un envers l'autre de Projet Montréal à Madame la mairesse. Il y a cette tension, il y a cette relation ou ex-relation qui vraiment démontre à quel point que Côte-de-Neige, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce est mal desservie dans la situation actuelle. Madame la mairesse nous informe comme quoi elle n'a pas de retour de courriel ou d'information avec le cabinet de la mairesse. On n'a pas beaucoup d'informations concernant nos collègues de Projet Montréal qui ont effectivement font partie de l'administration. Au contraire, au fil des années, on a pu voir une diminution d'influence de la part de nos élus de Projet Montréal dans l'administration, des pertes de position dans des commissions. M. Arsenault récemment, M. McQueen également. Madame Popiano, qui avait plusieurs dossiers au comité exécutif, il lui en reste qu'un seul. Donc, on avait une mairesse qui était là. C'est préoccupant pour le budget et pour nos besoins de nos citoyens. I hear a lot of numbers, and if I was a citizen, I'd be confused. On the one hand, we hear we've only increased 1% transfers. On the other hand, we're saying we're getting 3.6% extra from the city services. Who is telling the truth? Well, the truth is it depends on how you dice the numbers. The way to start, I think, is last year's budget. We start with last year's budget, which was about $54 million. And the city center, we're going to give you 1% extra this year. We're going to give you 1% for indexation, for cost of living, for your salary increases of all your employees, for your extra contracts. Guess what? It's more than 1%. It's at least 2, if not 2.5%. In other words, if we were to offer the exact same services, not any additional services through our operating budget, it costs every year 2 to 2.5%, depending on inflation. And that's on top of inflation, meaning regardless of inflation, it's going to go up at least 2%. The city center gives us 1%. So we are at a net loss every year. But then to sweeten the pot, what city center does, it says, we see that you're going to have certain needs, or we want to give you certain funding because of our priorities in these different areas. So we're going to give you these amounts. But this is just a one-time commitment, which means the extra amount we're going to get for libraries, well, it's going to be added on a one-time basis. Next year, if we want to offer those additional hours in those same libraries, guess what? It's not part of our essential budget. We're going to have to either cut elsewhere to provide the same services, or we're going to have to try and convince city services to give us those amounts once again. So those amounts that are added this year, next year, we're going to have to find a different way to provide for those revenue. So it might seem like it's 3.6%, but it's really not. It's much less. And I think that that's the problem. We're not getting monies that we need to be able to provide basic services to our citizens in Côte-des-Neiges and NDG. I'm disappointed in the fact that we're raising our local tax by 2%. Now, some will say, as Madame Mayor rightly pointed out, in the grand scheme of things, because our local tax only really accounts for 5% of the overall property taxes, raising it 2% is raising it like 0.02% overall. But guess what? In this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, to get $180,000 extra on a $56 million budget, I think we could have done without it. I think we could have found a way of cutting $180,000 or rejigging different items to be able to avoid that, because I think the symbolism of not increasing the taxes will be very strong. Now, I have to ensure that, we have to speak, we can't speak on both sides of our mouths. We have to ensure that we do, in fact, have a balanced budget. And as I've said previously, you can't go dipping into our reserves, into our savings to pay the groceries. You don't use your RSPs to pay for your groceries. It's very simple. Eventually, you're going to run out of money if you continue that way. That's what Projet Montréal has been doing. So when I hear Peter McQueen say that it's because of COVID-19, we need to, in fact, use the surplus, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Guess what? He did it last year, and there was no COVID-19 last year. It's a joke. He's just simply saying things. Hopefully people are stupid enough not to know the difference. That's the kind of attitude that we have here, trying to find, PR lines. When I hear Mr. Peter McQueen saying, how can a freeze be a bad thing? Sure, a freeze is a bad thing if you're not going to have a deficit. Guess what? Projet Montréal has announced it's going to be between $110 million, $129 million deficit this year. So if you want to have a freeze, no problem. Tell me how you're going to pay for that deficit. Are you going to cut services? Are you going to, in fact, borrow more? What are you going to do? The mayor hasn't been, Mayor of Montreal, Valerie Plante, hasn't been clear. What's for sure is that if you borrow more, you're taxing in the future. You're going to end up paying more. So it's only because it's a election year next year that Projet Montréal has promised a tax freeze without saying how they're going to compensate for that deficit. That's the kind of accounting, creative accounting, and communications that Projet Montréal is all about. When I hear Mr. McQueen say something like, we invest enough in roads because we're putting more in redoing the lead pipes. That's true, but guess what? It wasn't because of Projet Montréal. That was because I started it in the previous mandate, and you guys are continuing, which is great. Kudos to everybody. However, this year, we didn't have enough money to finish a lot of the streets that we did last year because Projet Montréal didn't give those city center transfers. So there's a lot of misnomers, of disinformation. The bottom line is we're getting money. We're not being able to cover our expenses on our operating budget. Simple as that. We have to use $1.5 million of our surplus. That's a fact. And it's not because of COVID-19. Okay, that's incorrect. City Center, we've made our effort. We've done some cuts, but City Center is going to be covering a lot of how they're going to do it. Maybe government funding is what my guess is going to be. Now, the other thing is we're simply not investing enough in our capital works. Yes, we're doing some good things in certain projects. Absolutely, we are getting $12 million, but that used to be the norm. We're not doing enough in our road work. Simple as that. And you could point out to anything that's been done, but whatever's been done in the last year, it's because it was approved a couple years ago, 2 years ago, not because it was been approved this year. That's the way things work, and everybody knows it. So last year there was $2 million on 500 kilometers, give or take. With an average life cycle of 25 years for a road, that means we should be doing 4% of our roads every year, which means that we should be doing, over 10 kilometers every year. We're not doing 10 kilometers every year at the borough level on the borough network. That's the problem that we have. So it's going to catch up, but we're hoping that people aren't going to notice because people are too, apathetic, or they've given up, or we're going to give them a few little candies, and that'll be it. J'aimerais, nonobstant tout cela, remercier les services pour leurs efforts. On sait que c'est pas toujours évident et facile dans le contexte actuel. Ils suivent les orientations, ils font des propositions, ils ont des défis avec la ville-centre, il y a des défis évidemment en arrondissement. Mais pour moi, le fait qu'on a seulement 1% d'indexation de la ville-centre, ça fait mal à Côte-des-Neiges. Le fait qu'on doit augmenter de 2% la taxe locale, c'était pas nécessaire, on aurait pu trouver une autre façon. Le fait que le PTI n'est pas compensé, ou plutôt ajouté par des fonds importants de la ville-centre, notamment dans le réseau de voirie, tout ça, ça me dit en fait qu'on n'a pas assez pour notre argent. The extra funds from City Center are like equalization payments. Every borough has a certain amount. There's historical reasons. I could have, we could put up a fight or debate as to whether, $6.8 million a year is enough. It's not enough. But because we had these equalization payments, it made it tolerable because we got our fair share. Last 2 years, CDN-NDG has not been getting its fair share. And I'll just conclude with, if in fact there's a desire from City Center to work on some projects, specifically the one that we all know about, the one that's been talking about, and unfortunately that it's on everybody's minds, is the intersection at the Carrie and de Maisonneuve. Where's the money in that? We keep hearing from Peter McQueen, we got to wait till Turcotte's finished. And we hear from Eric Allen Caldwell, well, we're going to review it. It's in the plans. Well, the plan is urgent. We could have put in some money now for studies, not to do the actual work, but to get things going if the City Center is not going to do it. We're not doing that. It's a lost opportunity. Yes, we'd have a debate whether we would get refunded or not, or reimbursed from the City Center, because technically it's Artillery Road, but at least we would send a signal and it would be able to start negotiation. So we're at the end of the day, CDN-NDG is not getting enough money. We have a dysfunctional relationship between the borough mayor and the mayor of Montreal, who apparently, because of the political consideration, we can't get things done. We have very weak Projet Montréal city councillors who are not able to push, either in caucus or with Monsieur Doré or otherwise, our fair share. That's unfortunately the kind of situation. And for these reasons, I'll be voting both against the operating budget and the capital works budget. Thank you.
Merci. Monsieur Gautran?
Thank you. I'll be brief for my second intervention. First of all, I'd like to correct something Mr. Perez said. Our roads do not have a 25-year life cycle. They last a lot less than that. And as such, we don't have to redo 4% of our roads every year. We have to redo a lot more than 4%. And we just don't have the funding for it. Second of all, I'm not sure that the budget that we're going to vote now, which I consider to be inadequate, will even be respected. This year, we had to give back $2.1 million as a cut during the middle of the year. The reality is the city administration, while freezing the budget, may well make certain cuts and they may come back to the boroughs. I don't have confidence that what's going to be voting will be actually the money we have in our coffers for the entire year. But let me ask a question to you, Madame Montgomery. You used the following words: the budget's a pittance, peanuts, underfunded. So why the heck are you voting for the budget? First of all, I have to point out, and you'll forgive me for being inelegant, that you voted for the budgets in 2018, 2019, and 2020, which were a pittance, peanuts, and underfunded. The structural problems we're seeing now didn't just start with this budget. We were already seeing it last year, and we had hints of it the year before. Can I convince you to change your mind? If you vote against this budget, it will not be adopted. Our rules require a majority of the councillors to vote in favor. If it's a tie, 3-3, because I'm voting against the budget, you get a casting vote. If you vote against, it's defeated 4-3. Now, that doesn't mean the budget won't be adopted. For those listening to us, if there is no positive vote, it goes downtown, and the executive committee can make the same budget at city council. Or they can try to meet us by trying to improve the budget so that it actually responds to our needs. So I invite you, Ms. Montgomery, to change your mind on this and to vote against the budget. As for Mr. Arsenault's question, I think it was actually legitimate. Your refusal to answer, I think, is legitimate as well. You're not obliged to. The public will decide whether you're doing your job or not. He suggests that you could have done it better. You suggest that he's got an axe to grind. I'm not going to weigh in with an opinion, but however, one thing is clear. Everybody who's spoken, except for Mr. McQueen, thinks the budget has inadequacies. Even Madame Popiano said that wasn't ideal. But however, let me explain something for those watching us. The question of, does the city administration have something against our borough? Mr. McQueen was our representative on the Finance Commission, and he got bounced 2 weeks ago. So we don't have a voice on the Finance Commission, which will study the city budget, which is 80% of everybody's taxes. We won't have a voice to articulate what we think is weak in the budget. And it's never explained why Mr. McQueen was removed unceremoniously 2 weeks ago. And before that, Mr. Arsenault, a month ago, was removed from one of his commissions. And again, never explained why. And several months ago, Madame Popiano, who remains on the executive committee, lost several of her mandates. She lost housing and cultural communities. I don't often agree with Ms. Popiano, but I don't criticize her ability to work in dossiers. And then yourself, now, you're no longer part of Projet Montréal, so I'm hoping your eyes are now more open towards the budget of 2021, but you were removed from your 2 commissions in February, I believe. As for myself, despite the promises that were made to me by the city administration about working collegially and naming me to the STM, I was unceremoniously also bounced as a member of the board 1.5 years ago. Nobody's been reappointed to any positions of authority in our borough. So you have to wonder, with a budget that's inadequate, that our own mayor says is a pittance, of peanuts, and underfunded, and our elected officials playing less of a role in influencing the administration, you have to wonder if they're sort of washing their hands of our borough, which brings me back to you. Don't enable that to happen. Change your mind, vote against, send a message to the population, and let us work down at City Hall. We may end up with the same budget because they can impose it. They do have a majority in council, and that's what's called democracy. And it'll be up to the voters in November 2021 to make their choice. But however, there's no necessity for you to come out and say the budget doesn't meet our needs and then vote in favor of it. You do have a vote, just like Mr. Perez and I do. We've decided to express our opinion by saying the budget doesn't meet our needs, and in certain areas is extremely weak. Merci beaucoup. With the last thing, lead pipes. We used to get our streets repaved 1 year after the lead pipe work. This year, they tore up half of NDG to change the lead pipes. Guess what? Not a penny to repave any of the streets. Not now, not next year. And if I was a citizen living on a street that had just been torn up and my street was now a patchwork of tar in certain areas of the street, I'd wonder, hey, why am I paying the high taxes I am and the borough can't even repave my street? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rochon. I'll just remind you, you said you were going to be brief that time. So,
Madam Mayor, I raised my hand again.
Okay, I just going to respond, if
Sure.
that's okay, to what Mr. Rochon said before I forget. Yeah, I think that we are underfunded, absolutely. But at the same time, I think our services have done a stellar job at funding projects that are a priority for us. And, you know, there's a lot of work being done in the parks. The Loyola Center is very high on the list. And, you know, I just worry that, like you said, if we don't vote for it, it will go downtown, and then, you know, I'm fearful that we lose control of what pittance we have control over. So I am going to vote in favor of it because I, you know, even though I think we are underfunded, I think there are some good projects being funded, financed in this budget, and I want to see them go ahead. And I just wanted to correct you, Mr. Rochon, one thing you said about Madame Popiano. She still has culture. She lost diversity and housing. So I just want to be accurate on that. Mr. Perez.
Thank you. I will try and be brief. I want to respond to two things. One is to what Mr. Rochon said to correct what I had said about the life cycle of roads and how I said they last 25 years and he said they don't. Well, I'm not going to get into a whole long debate. There are different categories of road. There's arterial roads that usually last about 15 years. And there are residential roads that can potentially last over 30 years. The average in the industry is 25 years. To let you know, the city amortizes based on 40 years, which I agree is not right. But all this is premised that there's proper upkeep and maintenance of the roads, and that's not necessarily being done. So the 25 years road is that. Now, I agree with you that because of the way Projet Montréal has been handling things, it will probably be less than those. But even in the best case scenario, if we were to be optimistic, we're not getting anywhere near the amount of money to get those 4%. And you're saying of roads, even though you're saying it should be more. So we'll agree to disagree and on the nuance. I think my last comment will be to perhaps to appeal to you, Madame Mayor. I think it would be a really strong message if, in fact, a borough does not adopt a budget based on the fact that city center is not giving us the type of money that it should. I think that, you know, Projet Montréal is probably, the councillors are between a rock and a hard place because they don't want to be in a situation where we don't adopt a budget and then it's, you know, it's kind of, it's unknown territory exactly what's going to happen. What I will say is that technically we have until October 9th to adopt a budget and to send it to the executive committee. I agree with you, Madame Mayor, that if we don't adopt our budget, we don't know what's going to happen and we don't know how the executive committee is going to react. I do think that it will be send a very strong message if we don't do it and to see what their reaction will be. At the very least, I believe you'll be able to get a response from Monsieur Doré or from the mayor's office to say, let's try and find a solution. We might not be able to get much more. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more. But I think it would send a very strong signal to the fact that we can't simply accept what they sent us, especially when it's so undervalued and unjustified as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madame la mairesse,
oui, Madame Popiano, oui.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la mairesse. Écoutez, je souhaiterais beaucoup clarifier avec mes collègues. J'ai beaucoup de respect pour Monsieur Pérez. C'est une vraie opposition. C'est tout à fait louable et c'est tout à fait à son honneur. Mais concernant les transferts centraux et le pourcentage auquel on a eu des discussions, parce que je ne voulais pas laisser du doute devant ceux qui nous écoutent. Donc, je l'invite à regarder à la page 19 de la présentation budgétaire qu'on nous a soumise. Et c'est clairement écrit, les transferts centraux, l'écart positif, il est de 1 900 082 et 100 $. Donc, une augmentation des transferts centraux de 3,7 %. Donc, aussi le champ fiscal qui a augmenté de 2 %. Donc, ça ramène à 180 000 $ supplémentaires. Vous avez très bien calculé, Madame la mairesse. Effectivement, j'ai fait le calcul pour ma propriété, pour une propriété de à peu près 500, une évaluation de 500 000 $. L'augmentation de la taxe locale est de 4 $ cette année. Aussi, les revenus locaux estimés de 56 000 $ de plus et l'affectation de surplus budgétaire, c'est ici la différence. Donc, cette année, on a affecté du surplus le même montant que l'année dernière. Donc, c'est pour ça que la différence est zéro. Ce qui fait que le total à la fin, quand on le calcule, donne, bien sûr, à cause qu'on n'a pas affecté un supplément d'affectation du surplus, donne 3,2 %. Mais les transferts qui viennent de la ville-centre sont effectivement, l'écart est de 3,7 %. Pas de 3,2 % ni de 1 %, M. Pérez. Merci.
Madame la mairesse?
Oui, allez-y.
Je n'avais pas l'intention de reprendre, mais encore une fois, je vais devoir demander à ma collègue, Madame Popiano, d'aller voir la page 10 de la présentation. Parce que la page 10 de la présentation est très claire, que l'indexation des budgets de l'année passée sont de 1 %. Oui, je l'ai reconnu, il y a des montants supplémentaires sur des postes budgétaires spécifiques, bibliothèque, déneigement et parc. Mais ces montants-là, l'année prochaine, ça ne va pas faire partie nécessairement de nos budgets initial. On va devoir peut-être les renégocier. Et vous savez, on va pouvoir offrir des services supplémentaires dans les bibliothèques. Mais l'année prochaine, on ne sait pas si on va pouvoir le faire dépendamment de la bonne volonté de l'arrondissement au pouvoir. Alors, c'est pour ça que, oui, il y a des montants supplémentaires, mais c'est les montants nécessaires pour l'augmentation de salaire, pour les augmentations de contrats. Ben ça, on a un manque à gagner, Madame Popiano, et vous le comprenez, vous le savez très bien. Alors oui, il y a d'autres montants, on a des avantages dans d'autres secteurs. Ces secteurs-là, on ne sait pas si on pourra les avoir l'année d'après, mais on doit trouver d'autres moyens pour compenser ces pertes de revenus ou ces montants inégaux. Et la façon qui a été choisie par Madame la mairesse et que vous appuyez, c'est entre autres par un transfert des fonds de réserve. Alors, les chiffres parlent pour eux-mêmes. On va laisser la population décider le cas l'année prochaine. Je vous remercie.
Madame la mairesse, merci parce que vous avez donné le droit de réplique à M. Pérez. Je suis tout à fait d'accord que ce sont les priorités, donc c'est les bibliothèques, les parcs, comme mes collègues l'ont souligné déjà. Mais je tiens à vous rappeler qu'on a utilisé les surplus budgétaires pour l'embauche des inspecteurs en salubrité, M. Pérez. Et vous savez aussi bien que moi la partie de l'arrondissement où c'était un vrai désastre et puis on l'a beaucoup corrigé. Je tiens à saluer à mon tour le travail exceptionnel de nos fonctionnaires, de tous les employés de l'arrondissement. Vous vous rappelez très bien, on a embauché 3 inspecteurs. On a fait tous les efforts pour que les postes deviennent permanents. Ils ne sont plus payés sur le surplus budgétaire. Et ça, c'est les bonnes nouvelles. Et vous le savez aussi bien que moi, c'est l'effort qui mène. On traverse tout. Il n'y a pas un arrondissement, il n'y a pas une ville au monde, si vous voulez, qui ne traverse pas la période difficile. Même si vous ne voulez pas le reconnaître, c'est comme ça. Donc, l'effort, il est là. Merci.
Merci, Madame Popiano. Et merci, mes collègues. Alors, je pense qu'on va maintenant à la vote. Je pense que, est-ce que tout le monde sont d'accord si je nomme les membres et puis vous votez ou comment est-ce que vous voulez le faire? Parce que c'est un peu difficile avec Zoom. Est-ce que ça vous va?
Oui.
OK. Alors, je commence avec M. McQueen,
Pour.
M. Arsenault,
Pour.
Mme Popiano,
Pour.
M. Rautran, excuse-moi,
No.
et M. Perez.
Je vote contre.
Alors, c'est adopté.
You're not voting. You have the right not to vote, but are you voting or not voting?
J'appuie, je vote pour, mais c'est adopté. Alors, et on a notre conseil régulier dans 15 minutes, 14 minutes. Alors, j'aimerais vous donner une pause pour manger quelque
Madame
chose.
Montgomery, excusez-moi, juste pour être bien certaine, c'est pour les...
Ah oui, c'est les deux. Oui,
c'est les deux fois, les mêmes proposeurs, même secondaires. Parfait.
Exactement.
Et même
Oui.
vote.
Et même vote. Oui, oui. Excusez-moi, Maître Reeves. J'ai hâte de manger quelque chose avant 7 heures. Alors, je lève la séance et puis on va vous voir à 7 heures, à 19 heures. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Tout le monde.